Welcome back to Just Not Another um, Massachusetts or Como's Automotive Radio Show. Today it was October 4th, um, 2023, and this is a significant day for a lot of people on my mom's side of the family, myself, and a lot of other people. Um, of a moment that happened for all of us 8 years ago. The year of the dragonfly, we called it. Um, and um, the time of the dragonfly. So, um, so for those of you who know it, today is the 8th anniversary of my grandfather, Joseph Anthony Dominicucci, GAD, or as my brother Chuck Kamal called him, Grandpa Joe Dad, back when he was a little guy. So my brother saying the most interesting of things when he was a kid. So um, I'm going to talk about um, lighter things when I'm done. Actually, I may not, because this blog might be dedicated to him. I usually pay tribute every couple of years. I used to pay tribute every couple of years, and I still keep him in his memory, but keep him in my memory. He's always with me on some. When I'm tinkering around with something, or if I'm experimenting with something, or if I'm doing something model related, or if I'm doing something with airplanes, um, it's just funny. I was actually I know you're watching up there, Grandpa, that I was playing Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I was playing with I was playing with some planes on there because he was a huge. For those of you who don't know, my grandfather was kind of a jack of all trades, but he was most known for many things. He was known for being a good father, a good grandfather, um, good husband, good brother, um, good brother to his brothers and sisters. Um, he was also maybe one of the most in terms of ingenuity and just thinking outside the box, and just figuring out ways to do certain things when things seem tough. Anthony Joseph Dominicucci was definitely the epitome of that. I mean, you got it from my great grandfather Antonio or Tony Dominicucci, who was also a jack of all trades and a very resourceful man, uh, even during the Great Depression years. My grandfather was actually October 29th. Was actually born October 29th. Just I think it was like maybe 2 weeks before the 29. I think he was born 2 weeks before the crash of 29, and my grandfather remembers a lot of those things and his family trying to survive. So, but it made my grandfather into a resourceful man, very good teacher. Wasn't shy to teach how to pull things apart or um, build a model or shoot a gun, because I actually learned how to shoot BB guns from Grandpa years ago in the basement of his house, even though my mother frowned upon it. But he was like, Susie, they gotta learn sometime, you know. And, Susie, they gotta learn sometime. Susie, they gotta learn sometime, you know. My grandfather, by the way, my grandfather, God bless his heart, had the typical Italian scratch. He scratches like, well, he's like, don't you ever do that ever again, you know. I told you, he always had the typical Italian scratch, and he had some of the greatest. And he was a great storyteller. He worked he worked himself um, to the best of his ability, and he succeeded, and he did everything he did, and he would fix and motivate people. He was very good, very generous man. He helped out a lot of people in this time. Um, he definitely made an impression on a lot of people. Um, he also served our country as well. He was a Air Force bombardier during the Korean War from 1950 to 1953. And then he came back over here, and of course he started the family that is the Dominicucci clan, and is still known today. So, and my grandmother is the last surviving member of the older Dominicucci um, generation of the Dominicucci household. Um, God bless her soul. She's 92, and I'm pretty sure my grandfather would be very happy that his wife lived to 92, because he definitely treated her well. And that was another thing about my grandfather. He was a very good gentleman. He treated my grandmother. He always treated him. I'll never forget this. My grandfather says, I said, how do you keep it going? I said, Grandpa, how do you get it going for the last 60 plus years? And he says, you gotta make her feel special. You gotta make her feel, you gotta give her joy. You gotta make her laugh, and you gotta make her fun, and you gotta make her feel alive. And he goes, and you have to have some experiences. He goes, good and bad, and a little bit of a humor, and some humorous ones too. But somehow, some way, he was able to keep his marriage going 60. They were married in 54. Actually, no, they were married in 53, so they were just shy of their 62nd when he died. Actually, they were. Actually, no, they just passed their 61st. No, they just passed their 61st. They were going to be 62 next year and 54. So, yeah, I think they were in 60. They got married in 54. Yeah, so they were married 61 years. So he was a true gentleman, great guy. He was also he was jack of all trades. He was a mechanic. He was a firefighter. He knew what he was doing. He was a very wise man. He knew what he was capable of, and he was. I think he learned from his depression days that anything is possible, and you can be multifaceted. His outside the box thinking, and I think the reason why I actually bless my lucky stars. The reason why I think I actually have why I have Asperger's, and the reason why I have a bunch of other things. I have a bunch of OCD stuff, like attention and detail sort of thing, is probably because of Grandpa, and I bless him for probably passing on those genes. Thank you, Grandpa. I've learned to think outside the box, and I've learned to think other people. He was good at that. He was always good at coming up with solutions and stuff like that. He died of heart trouble because his heart was very, very. He was, he was a typical guy of his time period, and it was he would have lived a little bit longer, but he followed and he broke his foot, and that really kind of put him down. It was very, very, very sad. He fought all of his problems for 3 years. But the hospital time and stuff like that wasn't easy, but I tried to learn as much as I could off him those last 3 years, and boy, did that man have stories to tell. He told me work stories, he told me war stories, he told me some crazy stuff. He taught me about the planes that he did, and he gave me the stern lesson. He says, "Oh, I'm your teacher, and I'm going to teach you this because you never lived it." And I'm like, "You tell the story, and you tell the story, and you tell a good one." He says, "That's right." Oh, he was always good with the story. The best one. I'm gonna tell a few stories actually, because this is actually because well, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a good storyteller. It wouldn't be a good storyteller moment. It wouldn't be paying tribute to a good storyteller without telling a couple stories. Um, so there were some very good moments in my grandfather's life. He lived during the depression, but that those years very formative, kind of helped him out. He lived in some interesting times. See, the 20s were the uh, the the 30s were very there was a lot of widespread stuff going on, but somehow, some way, my grandfather, my great great grandfather Antonio Dominicucci was able to keep the Dominicucci household going. They got through the Great Depression. My grandfather earned a lot of stuff. Um, my grandfather was a pack rat of certain things in a sense, but only essential stuff, so to speak. He was a more organized, um, very utilitarian type of pack rat, not ones that just leave things strewn about. Well, I know a lot of people that have pack rats. They leave stuff strewn about in their rooms and stuff like that. Um, but they learned how to, use copper, paper, and metals and stuff like that to trade for goods like milk and rice and bread and all this other stuff, because you have to learn how to fend for yourself, and do all this stuff like that. And he told me it was very good stuff. I mean, if they would find copper, they would find copper and they traded for milk. If they would do newspapers, if somebody needed, they would trade newspapers to a guy if a guy needed newspapers for painting, or stuff that they could trade with, and stuff that they could use, and they could break it down, and people would pay for certain things. Like you'd be able to get a thing of sugar for if you brought copper to the guy in the corner store or something like that. Little things that we take for granted today, but they're little. Anytime somebody asks me a favor or something, somebody or somebody needs something, I'm always on it, and that's one thing I do. We don't usually trade goods very much. Well, actually, I do pay rent, so I actually do pay certain stuff so I can get certain things. So, um, and that sort of thing. But he he taught me that, and then he taught me how he would. Then he taught me how when he was 10, 12, 13 years old, and when during the war, he would they would deliver to older folks. Um, they would deliver to older folks and stuff like that. It wasn't unheard of, because people back in the teens and 20s and 30s did it. Um, they essentially, my grandfather said they essentially, this is before Shaw's was invented, before Shaw's became a thing. This is like in the mid 30s, late 30s, early 40s. They actually, my grandfather used to deliver groceries in the neighborhood to people who couldn't get out, people who couldn't drive to the store because of gas rationing and stuff, especially older folks who didn't want to go out, do outside, and weren't able to do it. They they literally invented Peapod, basically. He took a bike. He had a trailer slash cart in the back that he could do, that him and his buddies fashioned. And my grandfather make quite used to make quite a haul. He used to make quite a living. I mean, he used to be able to do that so he could get his lunch, so he could get a bike, so he could save up for, to buy, to buy a house of his own, and buy a car, and be able to afford stuff for him in case he lived the bachelor life and he had money on his side. So he had a hustle going on some level. So the guy was unexplained, that I couldn't really explain it all in one video. It'd be ridiculous. He'd have to tell you the stories because he lived them, but he's way more resourceful than I am. I mean, I'm resourceful, but not as resourceful as him. I won't even ever come close to my grandfather in my lifetime. He was just in a different level, and that's the reason why I respect my grandfather on so many levels. So, could I apply myself a little bit better? Well, on the working front, to make money on the working, well, I always, if there was one thing he taught me very well, it was also working yourself, and working yourself to the best of your ability, and also being wise with your decisions at work, and being good and being a good asset, and not being a burden in your workspace and stuff like that. If there was one thing that I really latched on to, it was actually working and actually trying to make a living. That was one thing I got from him. And and the one story that stuck with me was when he was, if you guys don't know, he was a mechanic for a stretch. He was always doing odd jobs. He was always doing odd jobs back in the 50s and 60s when he wasn't doing certain things. But my grandfather was doing anything or everything in order to make ends meet. I mean, he was a firefighter in the 60s. He also was a mechanic for a number of years. He was he jumped all over the place, but he was very well tuned, and he knew what he was doing, so to speak. So he was always keeping his hands full. One of the best stories all time was when the guy, you guys watched the channel 4 years ago, the best story has to be when best story during his he has some more stories, but I can't really he always, I mean, the best one has to be, the best ones have to be of him, the best ones have to be when he was over here in the U.S. and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, he got to experience a lot of stuff while he was in Korea, and he also helped us actually in that conflict. But his best one was, his best war stories were always, him going out in Japan. I mean, and him going out into the towns and stuff like that and seeing stuff, even though he had, seeing all the sights. What's funny is when he actually has a book for during his war days. It's a special. You could definitely tell it was from Japan because of how the binding is and how the centerpiece. It looks like there's a bit of a camshell. There's a bit of a. It's got a bit of the book that he has all the photos in has a bit of a design on it, and he also has a camshell binding on it. It's clamshell style binding, and it's just very nice and ornate. Everything's covered. You can't really take the photos of because they're over 70 plus years old. You got to remember this is the 50s. This was like 70, 73, 74 years, 75 years old now. As of this writing, as of this video. So, and he's got videos of the bases in Japan that they used to fly to, and there's photos of him with the guys and the guys in Japan when they're going to go the onsen and stuff like that. There's one of them with him propping up this dead crocodile, this crocodile style puppet, and he's lifting it up, and he has the mouth open, and he's like, and the guys around him all wide eyed and stuff like that. And he was very good, guys. He knew the guys that were flying the plane, and that's the reason why he was supposed to be why he was successful bombardier. I don't think he failed too many missions from what he told me. He was a bit of a daredevil, being up to 30,000 feet, dropping bombs and stuff like that. Kind of the reason why I'm a little bit of a why I like taking things to the limit, and I like being a little bit of a daredevil myself. I always want to experiment and stuff like that. So, and I'm able to take enormous pressure from certain things, possibly from him because, well, possibly from my experiences as in school and stuff like that. But I learned to be under pressure and use it to my advantage, and I think I got that from Grandpa too. So, um, but during his civilian years, the best thing had to be when his buddy, I forget if it was John, Joe, or Mike, John, not John. I forget if it was Jack Tom or something like that. I think it was or George. I think it might have been George or something like that. I can't remember the name. But he was telling my grandfather they were working for a mechanic. And my grandfather was a really good mechanic, but this guy that was working for this guy, I think it was in Norwood or Roxbury or something like that, somewhere close to the house in West Roxbury, 33 Lansdale Street that he bought in 1960 for like, I think it was like $60,000 back then, back in the 60s. So he ended up telling this guy. So George, the guy. I'm just gonna use a name because I really remember his name. Actually, to be honest, my grandfather just doesn't even know because it was so long ago. So he went to I says, Joe, I'm a really good guy. I'm asking for a raise, and I've been looking for a long time. And he goes, yeah, you're a really good guy. And the guy was a really good mechanic. He taught my grandfather a lot. He showed him the ropes and stuff like that. And and of course, my grandfather kind of latched on very quickly because, it's my grandfather. But he was a very good mechanic, and this guy was really, really good. But my grandfather was like, no, he's in a bad mood today. Don't go in there. He's in a bad mood. Go tomorrow or the next day. And I says, no, Joe, I'm gonna really ask for a raise. I don't care. Maybe I'll make his day. Asking for a raise. I said, I'm really. And my grandfather says, I'm telling you, don't do it. Throughout the day, they go to lunch. He goes into the office. They packed up their tools, and then they're unwrapping them and stuff like that. He goes, hey, what do you need me to work on? He says, well, Joe, I have to go home. I gotta let go. And my grandfather was like, I told you so. I told you shouldn't have done it. I told you. He used to take his two fingers and he was like, I told you not to do it, And learn of the wise. You don't know what your bosses are really doing, so you just want to perform to the best of your ability. You don't want to argue with them. Probably the reason why I hate arguing with my bosses, and I've never gotten into a verbal dispute with my bosses ever. I've never made a scene in my life. I think it's that story alone where I've never made a scene in my life. Like I never really, like I just sat there and I've learned from my mistakes and stuff like that, and that's what you're supposed to do. My grandfather was always like, don't think. He says, don't think you're a good person, Mike. You work hard and you do this, but never think you're above anybody and think you're gonna be some amazing superstar type guy. You're a superstar because you listen, you show up to work, and you do what you do, and you make a good living. And I've been doing that ever since. That was that one story. Every time somebody does something that's not right, or something like, especially if one of the bosses that I've known are pissed, I remember that story every single time. I said, don't say it. I said, hey, you know what? It's been that's the reason why I say, hey, you know what? I said, and that's when I tell them, I say, hey, you know what? Let's go. Let's start over. let's do this. Let's fix this. Let's not dwell on it. If we want to fix it, let's get the show on the road. Why don't we? And I said we can do it steady now. We can turn over a new leaf and whatnot. And if they budge, and I said, hey, but usually I like to get it right the first time. Not that he didn't experiment, but he was great shot. Probably very good with a gun. Like he taught everybody in my family to shoot. Like a lot of people, like a lot of them knew how to shoot BB guns and air rifles back then. Some of them still do, some of them don't. So, but it's just one of those things. And he kind of extended those the extravagant hobbies to my aunts and uncles. If there was one thing that they allowed that I got the gene pool, it was to be creative and good. If there was one thing my grandfather was good at was taking things apart and putting them back together, but also putting things together and building stuff. That man made violins. He made boats. He made everything. He made a boat for every scene. Actually, it's funny. He actually made a boat for me, my brother Chuck, my brother Miles, and myself. There's a tugboat I think up downstairs, GAD, with on it. It's funny because I actually got the GAD one. My father got this fishing trawler one, but I got the tugboat with his initials on it because I was Miles and Chuck talked to him and they listened to what he had to say, but I was the only one who kind of showed up and actually said hi to them and actually visited them on a daily basis. And especially during his last 3 years his last 3 glorious years on Earth. I'm betting you he's probably building ship models or something up there, and stuff like that. So, yeah, he was always good with something. He was always good with a wrench. He was always doing some oddball project. Even at the end of his days, he was still making violins and boats. And he kind of passed that creativity and kind of that stuff because all my aunts can do some form of art. My uncles can have some crazy hobby like John John Joe and my uncle Mike all learned to had rocket kits back then, and my uncle Mike still has his rocket kit that lasted like a million years. So, my best memories of him were at 33. Those last 3 years, he taught me so much in that time. He taught me all the Depression stories. That's why I know all the Depression stories. Actually, one of the funniest ones. They were kind of my grandfather was, as I said, my grandfather was kind of a little. He knows he was a bit of a rascal, but he was. It was back then, but he was within limits. He was a rascal, but within limits. They always were playing around. There was Al, Betty, and Uncle Tony and stuff like that, and Uncle Tony and stuff like that, and all of them were all of his brothers and sisters were very good. I think his brother Al, my great uncle, my great uncle Al is still alive, and don't know if, I think Uncle Tom's dead, but Betty was dead long ago. She passed because I think she had liver cancer or breast cancer. I can't remember which one. One of those. Lord rest her soul. One of the funniest ones back then. This was during the Depression era, so you could go to the corner store and get all this stuff. So they had $20. So my grandmother, Princess Dominicucci, but also Princess Dominicucci, gave my grandfather $20 bill to get eggs, butter, milk, and bread, and a couple other things, cans of beans, and all this other stuff. This was back in like the early 40s. This is back in like the early 40s when money came around again, and people were actually spending it because of the war. They actually went to, there was actually a vendor that was actually selling fireworks, and my grandfather said, "Oh yeah, we get all this," and brings it back home. My grandmother was pissed, wasn't happy with them, and let's just say the guy selling the fireworks got banned from doing that ever again. I think my grandmother was like, it was more important than setting off rockets and stuff like that. And I think father, my father laughs at that one too, because it was grandfather for it, because my grandfather for it. He was always into something with rockets or speed or something like that. I think that's the reason why he flew in airplanes, or aeroplanes as he used, aeroplanes, as he used to call them. That was kind of one of his mannerisms. When he said, he goes, I said, you're flying the arrow, and he says, one of these days you'll find an arrow in an aeroplane. And he's actually not wrong, because that's how they actually say aeroplane in some countries. Aeroplane, that sort of thing. Oh yeah, the one with the fireworks was the best one. They did shenanigans and stuff like that, and I think, the best memories were definitely those last 3 years of his life. He taught me so much in those 3 years. I've applied some things and not all. But I've managed to. But if there's one thing he told me, it's just that you're more of a. He says it's cool to take things apart and put them back together, and figure them out. You always want to do that, and you always want to be good at putting something back. That's the reason why I was a good mechanic. He said, you could do that too if you wished. And I was like, I could, if I went to school for it. Which is why I might actually do it. I'm just following, and I'm part of the reason why I want to do cars and stuff like that. And I want to do automotive is because of Grandpa. I think it's an important step, and it's just part of the family legacy. So, I talk about the fondest time being around him, but what is my fondest memory of all time? I have a lot of them, and I think the fondest memories I have of him were those last 3 years. It was not easy seeing him go through the pain he went through. He had to go through like 3-4 surgeries. He had to get stuck in the arm with so many needles, taking blood over the years. He was kind of used to it. My grandfather said he got desensitized to it, but in those 3 years, I think that those 3 years before he died, I ended up, it was kind of the heels of my grandmother passing, and me not being around as much, and me not visiting as much. So I wanted to be at that. I wanted her to be there every single time. But I think the most interesting moment, and kind of the biggest moment in my life, one of the memories that will stay with me forever. It's not the fondest, but it's obviously kind of one that will stay with me forever. But it's probably seeing him on his deathbed that night back in 2015. I remember I think I was at the I think it was around this time, wasn't it? Yeah, it was around this time. I think it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock. I think it was about 11:30. I was, I stayed, I got sick that month, and it kept me away. I didn't want to really screw him up. My mother would have killed me if he gotten sick and he died. That would have been a bad way to go, and that would have that would have left a bad taste in my mother's mouth. I kept them in my mother's mind. I kept them in my prayers. I prayed to dear God that he would just hold out for a little bit longer till I got better, and thank God he did. But probably the most come to earth, come to grips with mortality at that moment was that night. Was that night, October 3rd, 2015. I will never forget him. He already had the morphine put in him already. He was. I remember my mother going out of the room, and I remember all my aunts and uncles crying because they didn't want to see him go. None of them wanted to do it, and my mother was the reason why my mother, God bless her heart, she's probably one of the best nurses ever in the world. She was by his side every single time something happened. Those 3 years, that hurt my mom. That impacted my mother a lot because she took him to his appointments. She took him to the hospital, and she did a lot for him in those last 3 years. And he knew I was. He knew I was there. He knew I was around. He knew I was. He said my name. I think he murmured it. Grandpa, you did murmur it because I remember the night before he was put on morphine. I'll never forget it. It was the most touching thing. Probably the best memory of him. Probably one of the other good memories was maybe one of the bittersweet ones, but he told me that you have been an awesome grandson. You have learned a lot. I hope you prosper and you do well in your endeavors. Whether you're probably gonna face a lot in your life. And he says you're gonna take on anything that you have. You're one of God's soldiers, and I said, well, you're a great grandfather. So you're an amazing grandfather. And I learned a lot from you, and that was it. So I remember waking up. I remember waking up the morning after. I think it was around 5:30, 6 o'clock. There was a bit of a ruckus. My father called my brother Chuck, and my mother went in, and I got up I actually had a shift at 2 o'clock that day, and I had to go to about 11 o'clock that night. No, I think it was 2 to 10 because it was Sunday. Because I went on a Saturday, because I went right after I went out. I think I had a 4 or 6 o'clock shift. I got out, and I went right up to the Beth Israel, and I remember getting up at I remember getting up and everybody in a somber mood, and I was like, hey, it's and my brother let me know that he passed away. That hit me hard like a ton of bricks, and we had the funeral. We actually sent one in an old school packet. I remember trying to work through all my schoolwork back then. I remember having to do an essay of the day it happened, and somebody was like, "No, you want your." I think my professor told me to persevere on, pass it anyway. She goes, I may graded. I may be a little bit more lenient on your grading. I got an A, and I think he approved of that. Not long after, though, dragonflies started to pop up, and yeah, dragonflies started to pop up, and started popping up, and we were looking it up, and his symbol, I'm gonna say through October, November, and I'm gonna say through late October, early November, we noticed that a dragonfly was showing up. I mean, one landed on my uncle John's shoulder. He was working on cars at the time. He landed on me, and he stayed there for like solid 10 minutes. And I'm not making this up. There's a photo of him, of it on his shoulder, and he says, "No, this is my dad. This is my father. This is Grandpa Joe Dad here." And he had an impact on all of our lives. He's probably the reason why I'm a jack of all trades, and I like to do most of it. And I really never back off. I never really rest. Even when I'm lying down here, I'm always looking something up and keeping my brain going and stuff like that. And but he always taught me to pace myself, do my best job, and he was a great storyteller. He was a hero to our country. He was a great father. He was a great grandfather, great husband, great brother. He was also a great he also was he was an amazing teacher. He was a hell of a comedian, great storyteller. He could work a wrench. He could work the trigger on any gun. He could string any sail, string any bow, any bow on a strings on a violin, and he was amazing. If there was one thing that he did well, was making his violins, and he used to play them once in a while at Thanksgiving when he was actually able to back in the. I remember him playing one when we went our first Thanksgiving over his house, when I was actually coherent and I actually knew what was going on, and he definitely me being able to work under pressure, and me being able to be good in high pressure situations, and me able to come out of the odds and actually end up surviving, kind of came from him. So yeah, Grandpa Joe Dad. I commemorate this video to you here on October the 4th, 2023, here at about 11:40 at night. And it's when you, I know it was, I knew it was kind of weird. I actually got up. I actually ended up opening my eyes at around 6:30, 6:40, at around the 6 o'clock, 6:40-ish. I was kind of coherent by then. So I think it was kind of my wake-up call. And I actually had probably one of the best days working-wise that I have had ever. I actually felt that was actually good. Like, I did 140 bags a day at work. That's more than I've done since I've gotten a produce. So he definitely gave me wings today. I remembered that it was his day, and he gave me wings, and I didn't stop, and it was just really good, and everything was all good. Everybody kind of just let me do my thing, and no one really gave me any trouble, and I had a really, really decent day, and I was able to stay well, and I had things going the way I did, and I dedicate all that hard work and all that stuff to give my brain to you, Grandpa. That was, and you know, me not wasting a second trying to do something. I know I waste a lot of time doing some things, but when I'm working, I don't waste a second. Just like, you're not wasting a second up there trying to reorder things and keep everybody happy. So, keeping everybody company with your stories and stuff like that. Hope everybody's having a chuckle. So, and this one's for you, but up here, and I'm hoping to live as long and have a story life like you. Like I already have had a story life, but I feel it's going to get even. An interesting life. I shouldn't say a story life. I've had an interesting life in a very a good one. So, and I hope to extend more as I age. So, and as I get older, and I do well. Sorry, there's no whole lot of tears. I did get a lump in my throat a couple times, guys. It is hard, but I wanted to fight back the tears because he was like, "Yeah, I want you to." He was like, "Oh, I want you to remember my memory. You can cry when I go. You can tell all the stories and stuff like that because I know you will." But I wouldn't get a lump in my throat. I wouldn't be human. I wouldn't have. His loss wouldn't have impacted me if I didn't get a lump in my throat and I didn't get a lump in the throat and things got a little heavy and I stopped talking for a little bit. You guys saw me stutter like 5 times during this video because man is a legend. In my mind, the man is a legend. He is a myth. He is a man. He is not a myth. He's not a myth. He's not a legend. He is legendary. He is a great man. He was the definition of a real man. I'll tell you that. And a real gentleman, a real man, and a real human being that was very genuine, very helpful. Good teacher, good storyteller. Awesome creator. So, with his hands, fix a lot of stuff and pull that trigger and work that trigger finger. So, alright guys, I'm going to bid this one adieu. I will pick this up tomorrow. I'm going to shoot one tomorrow. I'll let you guys know how Forza Motorsport goes on. I'm talking about cars. I'll let you guys know how Forza Motorsport is going, and I will give you my first impressions of it when I play it for a couple of hours tomorrow. So when I get home from work. Actually, it's releasing soon because I'm getting early access. So I will let you guys know about that. And yeah, this one goes to Grandpa Joe, Dad, and for those we've lost in our time. Pray for all those, amen to all those souls. God bless the gifts they've given us, and let his soul live on in eternity. Grandpa Joe, Dad, this one's for you, man.